How's everyone doing? So, yeah, my name is Ronald Ray. I'm going to give you some basic tools that you'll need for developing an Android app. So this includes, handling UI layouts, having multiple UI layouts, event handling, as well as images, audio, and like Bluetooth. So, start off. Oops, let's do that. Start off, you need a computer that has Eclipse 3.6 or greater, as well as Java JDK 5 or 6.
Hold 1 second, Ron. Does everyone know what Android is? We need to make sure we say a few. Okay, so we all good? Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
So make sure.
So then you go to after that you download the Android SDK from the Google developer site that they have, which is this link right here. Within the website, they also have instructions of how to install it into your computer and what you need. The Eclipse plugin is one thing you'll need, and like in the website, I'll tell you exactly what you have to do. The website also contains class references, so you can look up some more methods of whatever class you want to interact with. They have samples, and then other information that can help you while developing your app.
Can we stop for a second?
Yeah.
So I think for the CS people, this is probably pretty, I think we were familiar with this, but I'm thinking maybe some of the other people don't know why we're even talking about this. I don't think you guys saw it.
Right, I agree that not necessarily all of you will be able to benefit from this particular talk. And this is not something that we typically teach to CS people either. And so we wanted to make sure that, and also this will be more evident when you show the pairings of the students towards the project. We're trying to make sure at each group there is a CS person who will do a lot of this development. And then there's somebody in bioengineering and somebody in psychology or communication, so we have a well-rounded team for each group. And we just want to make sure that loaded up front, we get all the CS people to know, how to use this technology so they can help develop for it. Next week, when jet lag. When Daniel Salter comes to speak, he's from the art department, and he's going to talk about rapid prototyping with Arduino, and also rapid prototyping machines and how to make these different plastic objects that we could use to prototype them. So this is something we as CS people really don't know much about, but we're going to try and learn some of that too. So we're hoping to try and give everyone a well-rounded education here. And if you don't quite grasp everything in the CS part, don't worry about it. When we get to other areas like, when you present papers about communications and ethics and psychology, the CS people will also be just as lost as okay? But we just want everyone to just get a feel for everything.
I'll slow down a little bit. So what Eclipse is an IDE to develop programs, and Android is pretty much the operating system with phones. So once you download everything, Eclipse kind of makes a couple of changes. Let me put it in the center. So what's different about Eclipse after you install the plugins would be these buttons up here. It's pretty much handle either installing the SDKs as well as the emulator that you'll use for debugging, and then just creating a new project and stuff like that. So to create a new project, you simply press this button up there. You can't see my arrow. With that one right there, the folder with the A and the plus sign. So once you click on that, there's a little wizard that walks you through creating a project. So the first thing you do is enter the name of your project. I'm just going to call it example 2, because I already have that in there.
Sorry, there's already.
Oh, there's already example 3. Okay, sorry about that. And then the next button shows up, and then right here you have a list of API levels. So the API levels handle different versions of Android out there. You have Ice Cream Sandwiches, which is the new one that came out, which is 4.0 and 4.03. There's 3.0, which is for tablets, and then most phones either run 2.3 or 2.2 right now. So depending on what you want to do, you choose the API based on that.
So it's not backward compatible?
If you create a project for 2.2, it will work on 2.3 phones. But if you have a 2.3 app, it won't work on 2.2 phones. So there's that thing. There might be some changes that you have to be aware of, like 4.0 made a lot of changes that might interfere with the 2.2 API or 2.3 API. So that you might have to see what changes occurred in the Google website that they provide for you. So we'll just go with 2.2 because most phones out there and most like media players use either 2.2 or 2.3. So we'll go with that. So here now, all you have to do is make a package name. The standard usually is having like com dot either a company name or your name or whatever, and then the name of your project, that's example 3, and then click finish. And then here's right there is your project. Now when you open your folder, there's a couple auto-generated stuff that you'll look at that I'll walk over. The first thing is the source folder. Android provides, it's a little slow. Oops. Sorry about that. So Android provides you with one activity already. If you take a look at that, there's some auto-generated code there. All this does is just sets a layout for your activity, which I'll go more into as the presentation goes on. The next folder is the gem folder, which has a file called r.java. Now you'll reference this folder or this Java file a lot within your app. What this basically does is hold references for your images, your UI layouts, any UI widgets that you'll have, as well as any audio that you'll have. And the folder after that is just the Android library that you can take a look at. There's an assets folder which you can either put your audio in or databases if your app is going to use databases. This is the first time I was seeing the bin folders, so I can't really explain that. But the next folder that will be use of you is the resource folder. Now this is where you have your images as well as your layout, UI layouts. As you can see here, there's 3 folders for images. Since there's multiple types of Android phones, each phone has different pixel densities. It's best to have different size images so that they'll look good on different pixel densities. The next thing is the layout folder, and this is what has your UI designs. I'll go over more on that also. The value folder has some strings, but it's called strings.xml. Right here, you can create like global strings that your app will probably use. Strings is just a sequence of characters. And then the last file that you'll interact with is the Androidmanifest. This pretty much controls your app's functions and stuff. I'll also go over that as we go on. Let me head back to the presentation. So, you kind of have something started. What you'll usually do is create a UI to start off with. So I'll go over a couple of classes that handle the UI objects. So you have a class called view class as well as a view group class. The view class is just the base class for all widgets. It's what you put into your UI objects. So like buttons are views, spinners are views, as well as radio buttons and text. What it is just a rectangular space that handles events as well as draws itself on the screen. A view group is used for organizing your layout. So what that does is contain other views. Examples would be like linear layout, relative layout, and table layout. So all your widgets that you want on your screen will go into a view group. So I'll go more into that. So you're creating a UI layout. There's two methods you can use to create it. There's a graphical layout that just uses drag and drop, as well as a properties tab to kind of control the properties of each little item you have there. Anytime you drag and drop something, it auto-generates the XML code for you. And then if you feel more comfortable just coding it up, you can manually code in whatever you'd like. I personally think it's easier to edit the properties of the widgets within the XML code. And this will also update your graphical view as you change the code around. You can use one or the other to create a full layout, but it's better to use both because then you'll end up finishing things quicker. So let me go show you how some of this is done. Okay, so this is the UI layout creation, the graphical layout. The first thing that they give you is just a text view that says hello. Let's delete that. So if you want to add something, well, these are all your little widgets on the side, and there's more things within the folders. You know, you can click on it and see text fields. There's also the view groups. Sorry, I didn't update. These are the view groups, the linear layout, the relative layout that you'll use for organization. And there's a bunch of other things that you can use, as you can see here. But so if you want to create a layout, let's start off with adding a linear layout. And then let's put in, you know, whatever we want on there. So a couple text fields. And it's better to have multiple linear layouts and multiple relative layouts because that helps you organize things a lot better. So if you want things to be organized vertically, you create a linear layout that's orientated vertically. If you want something horizontal, you can put in a linear layout that's horizontally orientated. And then as you can see, if I put in the buttons, they show up next to each other horizontally. So if you look at the XML, all this is created once you drag and drop your items. Let me see if the properties tab shows up. I can't find it on here. Usually you'll see either properties tab on one of these sides or the bottom. I removed it because I don't really use it. I like getting into my code.
Can you try to bring up the properties?
Yeah, I'll try to see.
It's on the window. Show a view.
Yeah, there you go. Property. Let me put it on the side. So let's go to the graphical layout. Click on the object. So there you go. It shows you all the widget's properties, and on this side is where you edit it. So I don't like this because you kind of have to look for it, find it, and once you know, it's kind of annoying. Like if you want to change the text, you have to look for it and change it. So, button. And then it changes it right there. What I prefer doing is going to the XML file. It goes a lot faster because everything you see is under. Like here's the text size, or here's the text for your view. You know, there's the sizes. You know, you can change everything over here. Things you'll use are some helpful tips. If you're going to reference it in your Java code, you'll want to create a unique ID, identifier. So you can change it to something that you'll memorize. So let's say positive. Let's say if you want a yes or a no, negative. So that when you reference it within your code, you know which button you're talking about. And if you're not going to use something like these linear layouts, we're probably not going to reference them. Just delete it because you don't want to, just fill up your r.java file with unnecessary things. It'll make it easier when you're coding, because then if you have multiple activities, you'll have multiple of those instances in your r.java class or file, and it'll get annoying. It'll get a little tedious.
So Ron, how do you know what are all the different?
So the good thing with Eclipse is once you type that in, there's a pop-up that tells you all the little things that there is. And once you get the hang of it, you know what you want, you can easily change it. So if you want text size, you just, there's text size. And then if you're dealing with text size, so here you can find text size. If you're dealing with text size, what you want to do is, put in a number that you want. So let's say 20, and you want to put SP. SP pretty much tells Android that you're using the user fonts, and you're using the value 20 within the user font. If you're doing it within a button, if you're changing the size of a button, what's recommended is to use any of these values. There's rep content, which just reps whatever it's within the view. There's fill parent, which makes it the same size as the parent layout. And then there's what's the third one? Let me go with the properties. Tab of the button. So yeah, it's match parent, which is the same size as the linear layout you're having in, and then there's fill parent, which makes it the whole size of the parent object. So here you can also mess with the orientation. Let's say you want everything centered. You can put Android. Oh, Android wrong. Gravity, you can put center. And if you look at your view, everything's centered. You can do the same thing with any of the other objects. So this kind of helps you organize it better. Like I said, what I like doing is just dragging and dropping to have a general area, and then manually putting this stuff in and check if what I have is what I like. And once you have that, it's pretty much set. So let me get back to the presentation. That's pretty much how you create a UI layout. So there's a couple of images of the actual thing, but I went over that. So after you have your UI layout, you have to make your partnering activity class for it. So an activity is pretty much a component that provides a screen to the user, and it handles the code for all the event handling and interacting with the screen. It's all done in Java code, and it pretty much runs the UI layout you created. Your apps usually have multiple activities because they have multiple screens. So you have like a start screen, maybe a menu screen, stuff like that. So I'll go over some things about the activity class to help you code. It's not like normal Java programs or other programs that have like a specific main method. What Android has is a series of methods that are called onCreate, onStart, onResume. So what happens is when your app is running, the OS calls each of these methods depending on what's going on. So when a user first clicks your app, Android will call your app's onCreate method. So it'll run whatever code you put in within your onCreate method. After that code's done running, it'll call your onStart method, which is, your app is starting, and it'll run some code there. Then after that's done, it'll go to your onResume method. So let's say, for example, you have a game, what you'll most likely put when you have you're interacting with your activity that runs the game, right here you'll probably start your game thread, because that's what's going on while your app is running and continuing. And then if for any reason something comes in the foreground of in front of the activity, then Android calls on pause. So what this does, it keeps the previous state, and it just has whatever come up. So let's say in your game, someone pushes the pause button. In your activity code, you pretty much just pause the thread, and then just let whatever happened happen. And once your activity comes back in the foreground, it'll go back to the onResume method. There's also an onStop, which is a much stronger pause method pretty much. This just means that this state was lost because the user wasn't using it, didn't use it recently. And the Android clears up the memory so it can do whatever else it needs to do. But within your onStop method, you can either go back to onRestart, which is on start again, or if you haven't used it a lot longer, you'll have to go back to your onCreate method. And then onDestroy just simply destroys your activity. It's gone for good, and you can't go back to it unless you restart your app or whatever.
Ron, how long do you have to be stopped before you have to go back to onCreate?
It really depends on the Android itself. As you can see here, it says if other applications need memory, then it'll release the memory that's not being used.
Yeah, all right.
So that's how Android handles that.
Okay.
Another thing that Android kind of handles for you is the activity backstack, is what they call it. So this is pretty much when the user pushes the back button. This is what happens. What Android has is a stack of for your app activities. So in this example, there's one activity, you press this button, it goes to this activity. You press that start activity button, it goes to the third. And let's say the user presses the back button. So what happens in the stack is, it adds it's last in, first out. So the last thing that goes in goes on top. And if you press back, it takes it off the stack, it calls the onDestroy method of that activity, and returns you to the previous, or in this case, the previous activity. So that you don't have to implement yourself, Android does it for you, so you don't have to worry about that. One thing you should know. So this pretty much showed you this, how you start up. Android, when you start your first activity, Android has this code set for you, but it doesn't really do anything besides show the layout of your screen on the screen. So you actually want to do something with it, you'll have to, reference your UI objects. So this is how you would do that. Within your either onCreate method or onStart, depending on how your app is functioning, you initiate your objects, similar to all other code, all other languages, except you don't use a new operator, you use a findViewById operator method. Within it, you pass in the ID, which is contained in the r.java file. So this is the first time you see a reference to the r.java file. And all of the view objects are pretty much done the same way. As you can see, I have a button, a radio button, and a linear layout. One thing is that you have to add a cast to the method, because the method just returns a basic instance of the view class. And then, if some of the views have some extra methods that go along with it, so you need to add the cast so Android knows, hey, this is a linear layout, not just a basic view. So after you initiate your button, you want to set what happens when you click it, whether it's event handling. This can be done on pretty much all views. You use methods such as onClick, onTouch, onLongClick, depending on what you're trying to implement. There's multiple ways you can do this. You can do it right on the object itself. So once you have your object, you call set Onclicklistener, and you give it a new view.Onclicklistener. And what that does is give you this app override code that you have to implement. And within here, you pretty much just put in whatever code that you need to do once either a button's clicked or whatever. Another way you can do this is have your class implement the Onclicklistener. And this is most better used if you have multiple buttons. If you have a start button, a quit button, let's say, or if you have a calculator that has a 1, 2, 3, 4 plus minus button, your activity itself handles the Onclicklistener method.
Ron?
Uh-huh.
So when you're
Quick
creating
phone.
your GUI here,
Uh-huh.
right, and you have all the buttons and stuff, now if you want the button to do something, you can't just drop something in there. You have to create the code itself in
Yeah.
order for it to do something.
Yeah, like as I showed you in here, you have to first initialize the button, and then you have to set the listener for the button. And right here is where you put in the code
All right.
for what you want it to do. So if it's a quit button, here you pretty much would just put in the code to finish the activity or whatever. If it's like in the calculator, you know, if it's the 1 button and you set on click, you pretty much tell it to put the 1 on the screen or something like that. And that's what you'll do here.
So that's just layout.
Yeah, that's just layout. That's
to
all
make
that
it
does.
look good, whatever it
Yeah.
is, and then this is the meat of
So this is,
the
yeah, that's why I said the activity pretty much is the engine behind your layout.
Mhm.
So the activity class is what handles all the services, the button clicks, the touching, and all that stuff.
And you can't automate that.
Huh?
You can't automate.
No, you have to code that.
Okay, you actually have to
You have to
code
code
it.
that,
Okay.
yeah. So this is the second way. I said if you have multiple buttons, this is probably the preferred way. You know, after you initiate your object, you call the set Onclicklistener, which is the same, except you pass it this time around, because your activity is the one that's implementing the Onclicklistener. And then here's the app override code again, but since you have multiple buttons, you need to have a switch case statement. What you do is the view here is the view that's calling on click, or that's being clicked. You get that view's ID and you compare it with whatever ID whatever objects you want to, you know, set the on click for. So in this case we have 1 button, a radio button, and a button 2. And within each bracket you pretty much tell it the code for handling the event.
Is there a way for Eclipse to automatically generate a template for this?
What it does, it just auto-generates everything besides the switch case statement.
Okay.
So
It's already there.
once you put in that code, you know, it'll tell you add unimplemented methods, and then it'll just come with unclick without the brackets. And the same thing happens when you go here. Once you put this in, this automatically comes up for you. So you don't have to really type it in. And you'll see that format pretty often with Android. There's a lot of, you know, other event handlings or menu creations that have similar format. So it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. The other bits of codes that would be helpful would be starting a new activity. So let's say one of your buttons, you go to another screen. What you do is use either one of these. There's it's the same method, but it's start activity, and within it you create a new intent, and you give it the name of the action that you set up in your manifest file. Usually it's, you know, your package name .some name, or you just create the new intent object and you give it, you know, your first activity .this and your second activity .class, and you call start activity and just pass it the new intent object. And then just for looks, you would want to hide the title bar of your app. When you first start, Android shows the title of your app. To do that, you call request window feature and you pass it windows.feature no title. And then if you want the whole screen, if you also want to take away the bar that shows the signal strength and the time, you call get window.set flags, and you give it 2 instances of window manager.layout params.flag full screen. Now when you put this in your activity, you want to make sure you have it. You want to make sure you have it before you set the content view. So this method right here, set content view, is what's telling Android this activity is using that layout. So that code will go in front of here because otherwise it'll give you an error.
That code will go in front of where?
That code, the window code that I just
Yeah.
showed you, goes before this method right here.
Okay.
Otherwise it'll give you a layout because there's no screen that Android knows of.
So every activity needs a layout.
Yeah.
Process. You don't know what it's going to show.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
path.
So, most of this code, once you have it, you pretty much copy and paste. That's what I do. There's a lot of stuff. I even get confused once in a while with the parameter names. And lastly, with activities, you want to send information from one activity to another. This you see a lot of times in Android apps. Like if you have a Notepad app and you select the name of you select a Notepad. You want to in the following screen they usually show the name of the Notepad or what you're doing. So let's say you want to pass the name of the following object. So if you want to send a string, for example, the first thing you do is you have activity A and you want to send information to activity B. So what activity A needs to do is create a bundle object as well as an intent object, which I showed you in one of the previous slides for activity B. And then within the code, you get your bundle object and you call a put method. Now the put method is followed by whatever kind of object you're passing. There's a put string, there's a put array list, there's a put int. So in our case, we want to send a string, so you call put string, and that takes two what's the word? Takes two things. So the first thing would be a key, and the second is the actual value you want to send in. The key is used for referencing in your next activity when you're trying to get it. What it pretty much does is hash it using whatever key you pass it. So after you put it in your bundle, you get your intent object and you call put extras, and you give that method your bundle. So you're pretty much putting that bundle in the intent for activity B. And then once you're in activity B, you create a bundle using getIntent.getExtras. So that gives you the bundle that you put in the intent. And then if you want to get an item similar to the put method, you have a .get, and then followed by whatever kind of object you have. So get string, get int, get array list, and what you pass it is the key that you put in the previous activity. So next slide is an example of this. So what's going on here, I pretty much made an Android app of one of my projects I did for Jason's 340 class. In this case, you have a list of drinks, okay? And the user can click on any of the drinks. So I have a list view that I have called user drinks, and then this is the method to set up an on item click. So you do Untitled and you pass it an adaptive view to Untitled, such as similar to the button using just different words. So in the on-item click, I want the name of the drink that the user chose, because in the next screen I'm going to pull up the recipe as well as the instructions to how to make it. So I set the drink equal to the item that the user clicked, and then here I create a bundle using new bundle, and then I call bundle.putString, and I pass it a key which I just called drink, and as well as the object that I'm trying to pass. And then as you can see here, I create the new intent, and I pass it search result.dis, which is the name of this activity, and the next activity is drink information, so I pass it drink information.class. Here I call the put extras method, and I pass it the bundle, and then I just start the next activity. So once the next activity is started, here I do all the Windows features. I set the content view. I initiate my database that I have as well as some views. Now here's where I get the string. So I create a bundle object and I call getIntent.getExtras. So this gets the bundle from the activity's intent. And then here I have a final variable that I call drink, and I get the string from the bundle using the getString method, and I pass it the same key I used in the previous method. So that's how you pretty much send data between activities. If you have to send data, you can do different kinds of objects, pass it different kinds of objects.
So is this pretty much canned so that, you know, if you have the template, you can just change what's in there for each thing that you want to pass from one part of the app to another, or you have to?
What do you mean?
Well, is this stereotypical or is it specific? You know, meaning this is basically what you do, and all you have to do is change drink book to whatever.
Well, this right here is just my database functions. This is not related to the sharing of information, but yeah. Anytime you want to send information, the only thing that would be different would be this section right here, depending on what you want to send,
Yeah.
and whatever, you know, values you want to send it.
Yeah.
And then obviously just whatever classes or whatever activities you're switching from. You know, that pretty much stays the same because you're passing it the bundle as well as, you know, the intent. Just your variables might be different.
Okay.
And then in this, this is pretty much standard. And then again, what changes is the kind of object you're trying to get back as well as the key.
Okay.
So everything's pretty much standard, just slight changes depending on what you're passing and then, you know, what you call your objects.
So can the bundles only contain values, or can they contain references to objects too? Let's say you have a very big object, and you don't want to keep copying it and moving it to different activities. And you pass a reference by reference.
I'm
I
not
haven't
too
done Java in
sure.
decades, so.
I'm not too sure exactly.
Okay.
Depends what you're trying to pass. If you're actually trying to pass an actual file, it's better to have it in one of the folders, because then Android automatically creates a reference for that. But if it's something from one activity to another,
Like for example, let's say I'm doing a paint program.
okay,
I have an image, and let's say I click on something to, you know, change the image so that it's sepia tinted. So it brings up an activity panel, and lets me adjust the color of it. But it's adjusting the color of the main image, you know,
Not a copy.
not a copy. So I wouldn't.
okay.
Would I copy the file, or would I copy the image, or would I just point a reference to that image that we're changing?
What that does, there's a method called Startactivityforresult. So what you're pretty much doing there is you're starting a separate activity, which would be your changing. And what that does is, you know, you start that activity just to get a result. So in your case, the result would be, you know, the changes the user made to whatever for the image. So it still keeps the other activity, and it gets the result from the activity you started and then it'll apply those changes to your actual image. You kind of get what I'm saying. You'll see start activity on result as in the Bluetooth method, as when I go over and show you that. But that's the best way I can answer that question. So let me go over the Androidmanifest now, because, you know, what the Androidmanifest does is it pretty much names the package, also describes the components, so all the multiple activities that you'll have. It declares permissions, so if you want to use either the Bluetooth or you want access to the internet or access to the user's data, you have to declare that there. Declares the minimum API level, as well as the libraries that you need to link for your app to work. So what this does is pretty much tell the Android OS what your app does and what it needs to run in order to run, and the pieces that, you know, comprise the application. So like I said, the activity was like the engine that runs the layout. The Androidmanifest is similar to like the engine that will run your app. Well, it tells Android how to run your app. So I'll go over some of the Androidmanifest items. Let me go over the example I have here because it shows more. So here's an example of an Androidmanifest file. This is for a contact adder. The first four lines are auto-generated. You don't have to worry about that. Here is where the developer tells Android the permissions that they want to use. So in this case, there's a get accounts, the read contacts, and write contacts. All you do is just use the user's permissions tag, and you set the name. This right here is also the first activity is auto-generated by Android. In this case, the name would be your Java file preceded by a period, because pretty much what you're referencing is your package.java file, and so this is just a shorthand of that. This is just auto-generated also. If you want to change the label, you can. The action name is your intent name, or your activity's name. The default, the first one Android creates, you can't see that well, is up a little bit. So I just want to have a clear version of this. So the first one that they call is Android.intent.action. That just tells Android this is your main activity. The action.main. This tells Android is your main activity. And then there's a category, Android.intent.category.launcher. This tells Android that this activity is the one that starts when you click your app. So Android pretty much, when you start your project, this code is pretty much auto-generated for your first activity. If you want to add more activities, you just If you want to add more activities, you simply just add another activity tag, and you name your activity as well as whatever else you want to add. I'll show you an example over here on it. Oh, whoops. Let me show you the screen. So let me create a new activity, a new class. We'll call it other activity. I'm just going to copy and paste from the first one and just change a few things. Change the name. So if you have another layout, you pretty much change the reference to the layout. Right now I'm just going to keep the same, just because I'm going to go over the Androidmanifest. So here's our Androidmanifest. Like I said, it auto-generates the first activity for you, so you don't have to really worry about that.
So when you say layout, you're talking about the GUI?
The GUI, yeah, the GUI.
Good.
So if you want to, you'll need, since you have the other activity, if you want the other activity to run, you need to put it on here, or else your app will crash, because Android doesn't know that there's another activity for you. So what you can do is just copy and paste this. You change the name to period other activity. You can leave the label the same. This you change to, give it a different name. So the convention is like the package name and whatever you want to name the activity. So let's call it other. And the final piece, you can either delete it or just change this to default. It's pretty much the same thing. All that does is tell Android that this is a secondary activity that will show up depending on whatever you code before. So that just tells Android that hey, there's multiple activities in this app. They exist, and when a user when a user wants to reference to this right here, it means they're referencing to that activity. So that pretty much just makes your app run smoothly.
So if you have the display, the user interface, and you press something that says other activity, it goes to this and executes this code.
Well, no, it doesn't execute this code. What Android takes a look at this, looks at this code, and it looks at what activities exist. So it knows. If let's say you don't put this code and you want to change the activity, Android doesn't know it's there, so it'll crash. Because it'll say, hey, you're telling me to go here, but I don't know what you're talking about.
So it's like the manifest is just helping the Android operating system know what all the resources are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what that does.
Okay.
So that's why you tell it, the permissions, the libraries,
Yeah.
the components. So, you know, whether it's activities or services. So that's what the Androidmanifest does. It tells Android what your app contains and what it needs to run.
So it's just like in C, it's like declaring the functions ahead of time.
Yeah,
So these
kind of
are
like that. Yeah, kind of like that. Except this is for your activities
Yes.
instead of, you know.